So almost a year and a half ago, I was trying to go to Pittsburgh for an Easter gathering, and a bunch of my lights on my dash started flashing. I'm trying to give you an idea of the lights that I think were illuminating periodically, especially when I'd hit a bump. But they flash so fast, I'm not sure I got all of them. But number 12, the ABS light. Number 10, the brake light. I know for certain that the number 29, which is the anti-skid, the traction control off light, and number 30, which is the sway bar. I have this sway bar disconnects, and on a couple of occasions the battery light over here, number 2, illuminated and stayed illuminated. The two that would stay illuminated were the traction control off, and very, very rarely, in fact I think it only happened twice, the battery light was on. There may have been one or two others of these that were flashing whenever it would happen. But the other thing that would happen is the speedometer would drop to 0 and then come right back. It never stayed off. And the only two lights that ever stayed on were traction control and the battery. So that's an idea of what was happening whenever this issue occurred. And eventually I got, and they had been doing that periodically for a while. Eventually I got to the point where I had a battery light on, and I was like, I better turn around, because if my battery's not charging, I'm going to get stranded here. So I came home. All I did was check out the battery with a voltmeter, positive terminal to negative terminal, to see what my voltage was with the engine running, and it was in fact the 13.9, 14 volts, something like that, well within the charging range. And I went under the Jeep and I looked at some of the wiring to see if there was something that was corroded or disconnected or otherwise damaged, and I didn't find anything. So the next time I got into the Jeep and I went somewhere, the charging light was out, the battery light was out, and all the other things. And I'm going to try to look at this video and see all the lights, because they flashed too quickly to go through all the ones that were lighting up. But at any rate, none of them came on. And none of them came on for about almost a year and a half. And then a couple weeks ago, I was out with the Jeep, and we had a really heavy downpour. All of a sudden they started flashing again, and they would flash randomly, but almost every time I hit a bump, these lights would come on. And then one night, and there's another video that I put out. I went and met my son. We were going to go to a car cruise, and I was actually out with my grandson at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And so we met my son. It wasn't the greatest weather, and it wasn't worth coming back to my house to get one of my Corvettes to go to the cruise. And it was a good thing because nobody showed up at the cruise because weather was iffy. But we went into a restaurant and had dinner, and we came out, and I went to start the Jeep and wouldn't start. Because I had a check engine light at that point, I put my OBD2 monitor on so that I could, and I also had that battery light, so I wanted to make sure that I was getting 14 volts. And I had left that connected as we went into the restaurant. And when we came out, all we did was unplug it. Didn't turn on the Jeep or anything. So when I tried to start the car, I quickly signaled to my son, "Hey, give me a jump." And he stopped. He and my grandson opened up my hood, and my grandson had gotten to the point where he had connected battery cables on my vehicle. Meanwhile, I reconnected the OBD2 monitor, and as soon as I did it, my lights came on, and I turned the ignition. It started. My son had not hooked up the jumper cables to his truck yet. So my grandson had put the cables on my battery, but they never got connected to the vehicle that was doing the jumping. And miraculously, the Jeep started. So I drove home. Everything was fine, except that as I was hitting bumps and everything, I was getting these flashing lights. When I drove home, parked it, the next morning I had to go to a physical therapy appointment. I get in the Jeep, turned it on. Well, when I opened the door, I could see the mileage indicator that shows up on the dash when you open the door, right there. And went to turn the key, and nothing. So I went in a different vehicle to the appointment. I came back. Actually, I went and got my grandson again. Come to diagnose that, and that's where the other video comes in. We made a video on that. Long story short, we cleaned up the battery terminals, and it's been starting fine ever since. But the funny thing is, all these lights that were flashing every time I hit a bump, no longer flashing. It's been 5 days since we cleaned those, and I've driven it, I think, every day. And not once has they have those lights flashed, and they were flashing literally, I don't know, once every 2-3 minutes at least. So apparently just cleaning the battery cables fixed that, and my thought is that a year and a half ago, when I went in and I tested the voltage to see if the alternator was charging the battery, I stuck the pin from my voltmeter down in between the terminal and the battery cable, and apparently I made a good enough connection for that to work for a year and a half before it corroded enough again to cause it to not work. So take that for what you want. I think it's kind of strange, but if you're ever having an issue like that, maybe that's all your problem is a corroded battery terminal.